me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Woo! And hell is coming for a lot of teams this week. As they always say, this is a November to remember, right? And the college football playoff rankings came out once again. Still don't understand why they do all this. Well, actually, I do. It's just a money grab by ESPN and their sponsors and whatnot. Really don't need but one poll, and that's the poll at the end, right? So it's really just all for chatter and just to aggravate people, I think, and to steer the pot, so to speak. Now, today I'm going to bring Jeremy Smith in here again because he was a big success last time. A lot of people really enjoyed having Jeremy on here, and they've been clamoring for me to get him back on here. So Jeremy was able to set aside some time tonight. Jeremy Smith is from College Football Universe. I can't never remember the other group that he created, but he'll tell us that when he comes on here tonight. But finally, it's here. The week is here between me and the Oklahoma fans. We've had a nice little relationship over the last couple of years. I've been in a sort of a war of sorts with USC fans and Lincoln Riley. And, you know, that's about the time that me and the Oklahoma Sooners started seeing eye to eye. Once upon a time, there was a time where me and the Oklahoma Sooners didn't like each other too much. But it's finally here. Alabama and Oklahoma, the two teams I talk about the most, are going to be on the gridiron. I must admit I am a little torn a little bit. I have grown somewhat attached to Oklahoma over the past couple of years because their people are just like our people here in Alabama. You know, just blue-collar, hardworking folks that just love their college football. But tonight we're going to get on here, and I'm going to get Jeremy's take on the Alabama-Oklahoma game, and maybe he can give us his keys to victory for both teams. And we may go over some football games this week as well, maybe some college football predictions and get y'all's thoughts, and y'all can tell us exactly who y'all think is going to win. I also have the college football poll from this week, week 13. I've got it pulled up and set aside. I'm going to bring it up, and we'll just look at it a little bit. We may not spend a whole lot of time on that, but we will pull it up, and maybe y'all can poke holes in it because everybody else has for the past week. Now, I'm going to go ahead and bring Jeremy Smith in here. He's waiting in queue, and we'll get this party started. How's it going, brother?
Al, thank you for having me on again, man. Enjoyed it a lot a couple of weeks ago. We broke down some things, and looking forward to being with you again. And do want to thank you for the kind comments and the people that commented. I'm just like everybody else, just kind of a Yahoo who likes talking college football. So glad to do that with you again tonight.
You that common Joe and common Sally that puts us in the know, right?
Exactly.
All these common Joes in here, and that's not a slight. That's actually a compliment. Without the common Joes and Sallys, then the talking heads don't really have anything to know about. So, you know, the rumors and the stuff come from the common Joes behind the scenes.
Exactly.
That's always been my motto. But, yep, it's here this week. I wish that Alabama and Oklahoma were both, you know, in position to go to the playoffs. Oklahoma not so much now. But I think there's some kind of static in the background. I'm not sure what that is. Is that on my end or your end?
I can hear you just fine, but so not sure there. But hopefully we'll get that cleared up. But yeah, I mean, it's really amazing. You look at these teams, these programs, and two of the really great legendary programs in college football, and they haven't played each other that often. I mean, only like 5 or 6 times. And part of that's because, you know, the old bowl system, you know, back in the day, the SEC champ always went to the Sugar Bowl. The Big 8 champ, when it was the Big 8, they always went to the Orange Bowl. So there just wasn't a lot of opportunities. But now that these two teams are both in the same league, we're going to see them play a little bit more often. But I'm with you. I wish the game, as far as for both teams, meant a little bit more as far as playoff implications. But, hey, you know, we've got a great game in Norman slated for Saturday night, and looking forward to seeing what these teams can do.
Well, I saw an article today that they're doing some kind of rallying point or rallying around the seniors at Oklahoma this week. And I was not aware of this, but this is their senior day because their last game's on the road at LSU.
Right.
And so you just never know in college football, man. I mean, people think they got it figured out, and then a team that's just middle of the road or is on the edge of maybe not going to a bowl might find that one game where they can actually hang in there and pull out the upset. We've seen it in college football thousands of times. This wouldn't be a shocker if Oklahoma somehow pulled the upset off. I mean, it would be a shocker to a lot of people, but to people like me or you, I mean, we've seen this plenty of times in the past. I mean, what comes to mind was when West Virginia was in position to go to the national championship game, and they lost to a 6-4 Pittsburgh team. But just things like that.
I mean, it's been a crazy season, and we've seen a lot of upsets, and so this is not a game that Alabama can take lightly. And these two teams, Alabama, they're coming off of Mercer, which is essentially a bye week. They got a lot of young guys in. Starters didn't have to play a ton. Oklahoma is coming off a bye week, so they're a little more rested. That's going to help the defense, and that's really where it's going to have to start for Oklahoma, is creating some havoc on defense. Now, Alabama's made some changes over the past few weeks, and it's really worked well for them. They've become more focused on the run. They passed the ball 45 times in that loss to Tennessee. Then after that, 26 attempts versus Missouri. They only threw the ball 18 times against LSU. They did throw it 35 versus Mercer, but only 16 of those came from Jalen Milroe. So the majority of that was trying to get to some of the other guys some work in to see kind of what they had with them. Oklahoma, so Alabama's really wanting to run the ball now. Oklahoma is really good against the run. They're only allowing 2.9 yards per carry this year. So that line of scrimmage when Bama has the ball is really going to be a battle to watch. And I want to expand on that a little bit for Oklahoma. Stop the run with Milroe. They're going to try to make him win the game with his arm. And when he's been playing better with a focus on the run, we've seen it. He's been prone to mistakes and turnovers when the opponent gets pressure on him. Sooners are 7th in the nation in sacks, 6th in the nation tackles for a loss. So these guys are capable of creating some havoc. If they can keep Milroe from making explosive plays with his legs, that's severely going to limit what Alabama can do with their arsenal on offense. So the Sooners potentially have the ability to, again, create havoc, limit the tide, and that's really what they're going to have to do on defense is limit Alabama's opportunities to run the ball, especially with Milroe, those explosive plays.
Right. So when we played Tennessee, was Milroe? Is your phone like really close to you or something?
No, not too bad. It's away from me a little bit.
I just keep hearing something. I don't know if it's me or you or what. But anyway, yeah. But against Tennessee, I don't remember Milroe running as much. So, I mean, is there a secret formula to stopping Milroe? I mean, to keeping Alabama from doing that? Because I mean, if he decides to take off and run, I mean, what can you do to stop it other than maybe put a spy on him or have 2 spies on him or whatever?
Well, I think you have to spy. You have to set the edge, and that's one of the reasons he was so successful against LSU. Is he was just able to outrun everybody. They've had some injuries on defense. LSU has. You didn't have a Harold Perkins to try to chase him down, and so that was a lot of it. There was LSU could not just set the edge, and they cannot have guys fast enough on defense to contain him. Oklahoma's got some guys that have the capability of doing that, and I think again with the 2 losses that Alabama had, both against Tennessee and against Vanderbilt, their opponents were able to limit them in the running game. There just wasn't a lot there, especially with Milroe running the football. So we'll see what Oklahoma is able to do, but that's where it's got to start: is make Milroe beat them with their arm and try to contain the running backs. I know that the backs the past few games they've been just kind of adequate, not really been breaking a lot of big plays, but there's still that capability there. But the Sooners, they've got to set that edge. They've got to keep Milroe from just his escapability being a factor. If they can get him in pass plays in 3rd and long situations, things that opponents like Missouri and LSU were not able to do. Oklahoma has a better capability. So I think, again, this is a game where the defense could really keep the tide in check and have this game at least be pretty close at halftime.
Yeah, I agree with that. But before I start in on Alabama and what their keys to victory are, is there any way I can get you to come out and come back in? I'm going to see if maybe if it's a connection problem on my end. Just log out and log back in that link I sent you.
Sure. Give me 1 second here.
All right. We're going to give Jeremy a chance to come back in here in just a second. So we got here. See if he logs back in. Maybe the feedback from me won't be as bad. I don't hear it now. I think it might be something, a connection between he and I that's it's got the static or something in the background whenever I'm speaking to him. Maybe his phone's too close to his mic. I'm not sure. Something's going on. But, yeah. So basically what Jeremy's saying is that, and a lot of people know this, a lot of people know that the key for Oklahoma to beat Alabama is to keep them from having a great running attack. If you can keep Alabama from running, and if you can somehow contain Jalen Milroe, I mean, you're not going to be able to contain him the whole time. He's going to get his yardage. He's going to get his rushing yards probably here and there. But if you just follow the Tennessee guide, I think, and maybe to some degree South Carolina, then you may be able to stay close in this game, because Oklahoma, while they are 4-6, and a lot of people been calling them trash, I don't believe that Oklahoma is necessarily trash. I just think they've had a lot of bad breaks this year, as well as injuries, and a lot of stuff behind the scenes, by the way. As you know, earlier in my show, a show last week, I said a few prayers for some people that were fighting cancer, and I accidentally said the wrong person. It wasn't Denizen, it was Dale Cent. So y'all put out some prayers to Dale Cent and his family. Him and his family, he's fighting colon cancer, as well as, you know, Brent Venables' wife, Julie Venables, just now had a cancerous tumor removed as well. And so y'all keep them in your prayers. That's been a lot on Brent Venables' plate, man, ever since he's been here. So that's why I'm more apt to give this guy a pass, because there are things that are certainly more important than whether we win college football games or not. So let's see if let's get this. All right. See if Jeremy can come back in here in just a second. Maybe I might have to resend him the link. I don't know. Yes, I know Sperry just decommitted, as Jay Durbin just brought up. Let's see who's in the chat right now. 1989M was the first guy in. He's checked in first. He's number one today. As Ricky Bobby likes to say, if you're not first, you're last. With plenty of footballs and red dots, whatever the red dots mean. And then 1999M backs it up with Outlaw. The truth is that we don't play any more regular season games in 2024. We know who the top 12 teams are going to be. Not so sure I agree with that as how many people's been losing. We got so many 2-loss teams. Those 2-loss teams could easily turn into 3-loss teams. Just like mainstream media, we're forced to go along with or placate to the people's illogical, non-reality based delusions. Rye guy 1218's in the house. He's our Oregon guy. Are you going to the game on Saturday, or did things not work out? I'm probably not going to go. It was just the guy who offered me the tickets was just too close. If he had actually offered me the tickets a few weeks before, I might have been able to make plans. But as it was, certain things I just couldn't work out, and so it was just too close. But I appreciate the hell out of the offer, for damn sure. From Steve Pareto and Darlene Pareto. They were the ones that offered me the Oklahoma-Alabama tickets. Let's bring Jeremy back in here. All right, brother.
All right. Is that a little better, Outlaw?
Yeah. I was just following up what you said about Jalen Milroe, that everybody knows, Captain Obvious, everybody knows that you got to contain our running game. And Jalen Milroe, it's easier said than done sometimes, right? If you ain't got the talent to do it, like LSU didn't, I obviously didn't have the speed or the talent to do it, then it's not going to really matter either way. But so what do you think? What's Alabama's key to going in here and winning this game that they're supposed to win? That's what worries me the most, is that they probably heard how we're supposed to dominate this game.
Yeah, I think the teams have been a lot more focused the past few weeks. I don't think they're going to be. I don't think you're going to see the issues they had, like against Vanderbilt, or where the team just looked like they were lost. I think they put that a lot past them. Now, one thing to remember, it is his first year, but Kalen DeBoer as a Power 5 coach is undefeated in November. The man has not lost a game in that month, so they kind of got that going for them as far as the trend goes. But with Alabama, they are going to, even though Oklahoma's really good at stopping the run, they can't give up on that. They got to let Miller do his thing. They've got to try to use the run to set the pass. A lot of old school football in this game, because for Oklahoma, again, it's going to be getting to the quarterback. It's going to be trying to limit the run game. For Alabama, it's going to be trying to establish the run and then trying to get some explosive plays in the passing game off that. Justice Haynes, Jam Miller, they can't give up on them early. They got to keep feeding them the ball. And on defense, it's just going to be not letting Oklahoma have hope early, because the Oklahoma offense, I mean, let's face it, it's been awful. The offensive line for Oklahoma, there are 134 teams in FBS. Oklahoma is giving up 4.1 sacks per game. That is 134 out of 134. They are dead last in the country in allowing sacks. Now, Alabama doesn't have the dominant edge rush guy like they've had the past few years, like Will Anderson or Dallas Turner. But LT Overton has been pretty good at getting to the quarterback, at least getting pressure, getting him out of the pocket. And the past couple of weeks, we've seen Jahad Campbell come up the middle on some blitzes to be able to get to the quarterback. We saw that against LSU. We saw that a couple of times against Missouri. So this swarm defense that the defense coordinator has been able to set up over the past few weeks, and getting to the quarterback, getting pressure, has been really effective. And another thing they've been able to do is get turnovers. Here's another number for you. I kind of gave you one with a couple of weeks ago with some games, kind of a magic number. Here's a couple for the Oklahoma-Alabama game. Oklahoma is 5-0 when they have not turned the ball over multiple times. They're 0-5 when they have. Alabama, the past 5 of the 6 games and the past 3 in a row, they have forced 3 or more turnovers. So the turnover battle is going to be key in this one, because Oklahoma, they do not have the offensive firepower to be able to give Alabama extra possessions on offense. So I would not be surprised at all if Jackson Arnold throws a pick, or there's a fumble there off a sack, a strip, and then a score, or a pick six. Might happen in this game. If it does, it's over, because Oklahoma does not have the offensive firepower to be able to keep up play for play, possession for possession. If they give Alabama extra possessions, they're done for. So they've got to play better on that offensive line, and they've got to be able to run the football, because we've seen time and time, week after week, how these wide receivers have struggled to get open, because they don't have any guys there. There's been so many injuries, so many key players that have been injured time and again. And so I just don't see Oklahoma being able – they've got to force some turnovers. They've got to keep Milroe uncomfortable, and they've pretty much got to play a perfect game offensively. And I don't know if they have the capability to do that. Now, maybe not score 30 or 40 points, but they cannot turn the ball over. They've got to protect the quarterback. And Alabama's like a lot like Oklahoma. They've got to wreak havoc on defense. So whoever wins the lines of scrimmages on the defensive side is going to win this ball game. And I just don't – I think they can keep it close, but I just don't think, again, Oklahoma has the offensive firepower to keep up in this ball game.
Yeah, that's a crazy stat that they've only won 5 games. And every single game they've won, they've had no turnovers. So that's actually a pretty hopeful thing for Oklahoma. If they can just limit the turnovers, which is easier said than done once again, but if they do, they usually win. So, I mean, that gives them at least a light of hope. And what you just said, the 0-5 versus 5-0 stat, I saw that on Bob Stoops' show earlier today. Bob Stoops actually brought that up. So I know you're pretty much spot on with that. Also, there's something that I've seen Alabama sort of doing a little bit more that I've actually been liking, involving the running backs, not just handing them the ball off, but they've been including them in the passing game.
Exactly.
Since they started including those running backs in the passing game, it's really opened things up for Jalen Milroe. I think that's helped him out a lot. It takes a lot of pressure off of him. And I've also noticed that our defense seems like it's gotten more aggressive as the years went on.
Maybe it has, and part of that is they're growing up. There was a lot of youth, especially in the secondary. As the secondary's gotten more comfortable and been able to hold coverage longer, then that's allowed guys like, again, LT Overton and Jihad Campbell and some of the other guys to get pressure on that quarterback. LSU, that LSU game, they did only sack him twice, but they were able to make him uncomfortable the whole game. He was, Nussmeier was flushed out of the pocket a lot. He was making bad throws. And that's what they got to do to Jackson Arnold, too, is get him uncomfortable, get him out of the pocket, make sure you contain him because he is a guy that can, he's not dynamic running, but he can move his feet and just force him into mistakes. We've seen that all season long. Anytime Arnold gets uncomfortable, he makes a mistake. He throws into bad coverage. And Alabama's got some ball hawks on defense that have really developed. Amani Jackson's been making interceptions. You have, one of the guys that has really stepped up has been Grayson Hubbard, who has been able to replace Keon Saab at that safety position. And they've been playing really well. That secondary is starting to mesh. And that's one of the reasons that the Alabama defense has become so dangerous these last few games, forcing so many turnovers, is that secondary is playing so much better.
Well, I think also for Oklahoma, this is a situation where they actually, to me, I think Alabama's got more pressure on them now. Oklahoma is they have nothing to really lose other than a minor bowl bid, right?
Yeah. I mean,
so they can just throw the sink at us. They can just go out there and play loose. And is Michael Hawkins a better running quarterback than Jackson Arnold? Or are they about the same? Or because I was just wondering, they might be able to use what Alabama uses against people against us, because in the past, as you know, our boogaboo has been a running quarterback.
Well, Hawkins is definitely better running the football, but you make that point about the Tide having trouble with running quarterback. What they have trouble with is dual threat quarterbacks, guys who can not only run but also pass. Hawkins has been pretty one-dimensional. He's a young guy. He's still learning, and I'm not sure if he has the ball handling capability to really be effective against Alabama's defense. But if Arnold struggles, they may try him out. He can definitely make some plays with his legs. Arnold can move pretty well, but he's definitely not as effective running the ball as Hawkins was. But there's a reason they've been going back and forth between these guys, because neither one has really been able to effective and take care of the ball.
Yeah, and Oklahoma got a little bad news today. One of their quarterbacks for 2025 decommitted. I think his name was Kevin Speary. He decommitted, but yeah. Let me read some of his comments real quick. Sigma has his badge. He's deputized. He's an outlaw posse. He says, just tell Mildew to quit keeping the ball on every option replay. Well, I mean, it worked out pretty good against
yeah.
So I don't know if I want to I can understand maybe giving it off the running back, yeah, but I don't know, man. I mean, what do you think about that statement?
I mean, you got to make the read. And most of the time, especially against LSU, when we really started to see him running that effectively, is you read. It's called a read option. You read the defense, and his best option obviously was keeping the ball, because we saw the big plays that happen out of that. And it's not just the read option they're running. Some of these plays have been straight up quarterback draws or quarterback powers, quarterback counters. I mean, these are, they may line up looking like it's read option, but the play is Milroe keep the football and go and see what happens. That big run against LSU, I mean, that was just a straight QB carry play. That wasn't a read option at all. So it's called a read option because you read the defense and you give it to the one who's the best chance of making the big play. And more often than not, in the past few weeks, that has been Milroe. So, that guy can say that, but you can't argue the results.
Terry Sleuth is in the house. He says the Sooners have improved play in Missouri and Mississippi close in the road recently and should give it a good account at home. Doubtful they will prevail, but should stay in the game. That will be the key for Oklahoma, I think. And I know that's Captain Obvious once again, but is staying close at least until the third quarter. If they can get into that second half and be within one score of Alabama, or at least 10 points, I think that, they may, you just never know what's going to happen. You could have a couple of weird fumbles and interceptions, and then there you have a big-time Oklahoma upset. But it's just, I think they really got to stay within one score before halftime. If not, I think they might roll over, just like they did against South Carolina.
I'll give you another number here. That number is 400, and that means yards on offense for Alabama. Alabama is 2-2 when they do not break the 400-yard mark this season. Of course, those two games, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, they could not run the ball effectively. And also, those games were road games. This game is in Norman. So, if they can hold them under 400 yards, I think Oklahoma has a really good shot. You mentioned the Ole Miss game, and really, I think this game is probably going to end up a lot like that. You're going to see a low-scoring first half, maybe a 14-10 or a 13-10, 13-7, somewhere around in that range at halftime. Wouldn't even shock me if Oklahoma has the lead. But I think as the game wears on, you're going to see a lot like the Ole Miss game where Oklahoma's just not going to have the offense to keep the defense off the field. There's going to be a lot of places going to be running against that defense, Oklahoma, and it's eventually going to wear down. And I think you're probably going to see like a 27-13 type football game at this end up.
Got a nice little compliment for you from Sigma. He says, your guest is extremely intelligent. Great breakdown of the game. Yeah, that's why I brought him over here.
Thank you.
I brought him in here to, help bring the IQ points up. He's like our Alabama Vanderbilt version.
Well, some of the people I'm in groups with might disagree with you, but I appreciate it, Sigma. Thank you.
Jay Durbin basically backs up what you were saying. He heard we are first in turnovers out of all 19 teams, and you can't win like that.
Well, the turnover margin for Oklahoma is not bad. It's slightly negative. It's like negative 0.1. So yeah, they have turned the ball over a lot, but they've been able to force a lot of turnovers too. So but they've got to keep that turnover battle even. If it's like 0-0 or 1-1 or even 2-2, I think Oklahoma's got a chance to stay in this ball game. But again, the strength of the Alabama defense in the past few weeks when they've really come together has been forcing turnovers. We saw it against LSU. We saw it against Missouri. I mean, Mercer, we saw, but hey, that's Mercer. But that's really how you've been able to have this turnaround going for the Alabama defense is getting to the quarterback and forcing those turnovers.
1989M says, Sigma, are you an Uncle Lou troll or what? I recognize that spelling there. Yeah, well, I done told y'all his name ain't Uncle Lou anymore. We call him Auntie Louise.
I'm not going to get into that.
Me and Uncle Lou, we had our little spat once upon a time, and so I just give him hell a little bit every once in a while. No harm in that, right?
Not at all. Not at all. I've been in some groups with Uncle Lou. I actually like him a lot. He gets a little crazy sometimes, but he's no outlaw college football, but he's pretty solid.
Here's another thing that I'm really concerned about is, do you really want to play in the SEC title game? Ain't you going to risk taking another loss and maybe even getting banged up? I would almost rather not go.
That was tricky because, if you're a competitor, you want to compete, and you want to compete as much as you can. And there isn't, you win the SEC, you're going to get that first round bye. But yeah, I mean, if you lose that game, especially if you lose it big, there's a risk the committee's going to punish you for that. Now, there's been some chatter. The college football chairman in his recent interview Tuesday night kind of hem and hawed a little bit about it, saying, well, we don't want to punish a team, but when it was a 14 playoff, we saw it fairly often. But that's a smaller sample size. Of course, you got more teams now. But if you go in the game and you lose, that is a risk. But if you go in and you win, then you've got that advantage. But being an Alabama fan, I want to see my team win as much hardware as they can. Getting the SEC championship, man, it's awesome. I would love to see that. But I do get the argument. And that's something that this playoff committee and this new system, it's going to have to figure out eventually.
Well, exactly. With teams like Alabama and Ole Miss, for example, Lane Kiffin's the one that brought it up. People try to act like Lane Kiffin's a clown, but the guy's actually really smart. He says some really smart things sometimes. He just likes to partake in a little aggravation. As much as why I like him, because me and him's alike. But Alabama and Ole Miss with 2 losses. If they make the SEC title game against, say, a Texas or Texas A&M with 1 loss, Texas A&M's already got 2 losses, though, right? If they make it against Texas with 1 loss, Texas might be able to absorb that loss and still get in. But if Alabama or Ole Miss loses, they got 3 losses at that point. And that might drop them out. Now, the committee said last night that if you make it to a championship game, they'll take that into account.
Yeah.
And maybe let you stay in. But I just don't know. I'd be scared if I lost 3 games that they would definitely drop me out of the playoff at that point, even though you supposedly the second best team from your conference. While Ole Miss, say if Ole Miss sit at home, they're the 3rd best team. They get to sit at home while you go play and have to lose, and they get to go even though they weren't the second best team in the conference.
Yeah, it's a little different now. When we had the divisions, you got it a little bit more because you possibly had 2 teams possibly from the West that were like 11-1 or undefeated 11-1, and the East champion might have 2 or 3 losses. We saw that multiple years. With this format now, you've got the top 2 teams in the league. And yes, some of it's going to be determined by tiebreakers, but essentially you got the top 2 teams in the league going at it. And with this 12-team format, I think there is enough room to be able to account for, hey, yes, they lost their championship game, but they made it. And they made it because they were one of the top 2 teams in their league. One loss, especially a close loss, with an extra game that the other ones are not having, I don't think that changes that. So I think the committee's really going to look hard at that and say, yeah, they may have 3 losses, but it's a loss because of an extra game. So you really just got to keep it going and keep in mind that these teams are definitely going to have to again figure this out and figure out what's going on, how they're going to reward or possibly punish championship game appearances. And I don't think that you can, in good conscience, punish a team for making the championship game in this format and then say, okay, no, you're not good enough to be part of it.
Well, they've already shown that they don't always take wins and losses into account. They showed it last year when they put a 1-loss Alabama team in over an undefeated Florida State team. So there is precedence there for them doing that. Now, I brought the college football playoff poll up from this past week, and we all know this is not set in stone. I hope it's not because I keep hearing about this SEC bias and stuff, man. This thing got worn on me because I'm tired of hearing it. A lot of people were pointing out that Alabama moved up 3 spots over Miami, who was idle. Alabama beats Mercer and moves up over Miami. My point to them is Alabama should have probably been over Miami 2 weeks ago to begin with when we beat LSU down in Baton Rouge. There's no way you can tell me that a Miami team that's probably should have lost 3 or 4 games this year. They got a Hail Mary reversed against Virginia Tech in the end zone. And then they got down to Duke by double digits, had to come back and win. Should have lost to Cal, and then finally did lose to Georgia Tech, who was just 5-4. So my thing is, Alabama, we got to start going by the eye test, in my opinion. And Notre Dame is another team. Notre Dame, even though they've only lost 1 game, it was to Northern Illinois, who is like 5-5 or 5-4 in the MAC. So how is Notre Dame not being punished for that Northern Illinois loss, in my opinion?
I think they should be punished a little bit more, but I think here's where it gets really tricky with when you have a committee and you have all this going on with these multiple spots and these conferences and they add so many of these metrics and you never know because they're not very transparent. You never know exactly what they're taking into account with this stuff like strength of schedule and strength of record and game control. Are they really looking at that a lot, or are they just looking at a team like Indiana that's undefeated with a 100 strength of schedule and say, okay, because they're undefeated, then they're a top 5 team? Not necessarily. Now, I do think you should be rewarded for wins, and record, of course, has to matter, but also take into account that not all, especially in college football, not all records are equal. You have so many games against these G5 schools and the FCS, and you look at Alabama. I think they're kind of good where they are because, yes, they have the ranked wins that they have, but we can't ignore the fact that they've lost 2 games. The one at Vanderbilt, which week by week is not looking as good as it did, the couple of weeks after they beat them. And then Tennessee, who lost by 2 touchdowns to a team that Alabama beat. So there's so many moving parts in this, and there's so many levels with the strength of schedule and these metrics that they use and the different teams with, Alabama looks really good right now, but the problem with the eye test is that the next week they could look horrible. Were they the team that looked great a week ago, or are they the team that looked horrible this week? That's the problem with the committee in my mind, is that there's so much that can change week to week, and we get a little bit of a recency bias because Alabama looks really good right now, but I talk about Alabama because they're my team. But a few weeks ago, we were wondering if they were even going to make the playoff. And so do you look at where they are now as the biggest weight, or do you look at the whole season and say, yes, they've got some great wins, but they have a really questionable loss, and then another one that doesn't look too bad because Tennessee is a team that's right in that mix, and it was a game on the road and they only lost by a touchdown. So you just don't know. And then you look at Texas, and I've had Texas fans really mad at me this week. Because I posted one of the groups about the SEC schedule, and yes, 38th strength of schedule in the nation isn't bad, but it's dead last in the conference. And the really big opportunity they had to show themselves as an elite team, and I think they're a good team. I think they deserve to be in that playoff mix. But I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate here. Is you welcome Georgia in at home, and you lose by 2 touchdowns, by 15 points. The rest of your games, I'll put it this way. The SEC, yes, overall, either it or the Big Ten is the best conference. I think you give the nod to the SEC because there's a little more depth there. But you look at the SEC schedule for Texas, there are 6 teams in the SEC right now that are 500 or below. Texas has played 6 conference games. 4 of those games were against the teams that were 500 and below. You have to take that into account when you're putting all this together and try to determine how good a team is. There has to be these questions that are asked, and not just look at, they're 9-1, so of course they're a great team, compared to one that's 8-2. Well, not necessarily. So there's just so much that's the problem with the committee. And I know a lot of people are going to hate me for saying this, but I think that to really get a better field, maybe we should go back to some of the computer rankings.
Yeah, the BCS, because it was just told to pick 2 teams, caught a lot of heat. Mm-hmm. Because just picking 2 teams at that time, man, that was really hard. I mean, and even with 4 teams, it was really hard. But if you take the BCS computer formula and apply it to this, I bet it could pick 12 teams that were deserving, more so than these guys have. And they got 6 new members on the committee this year as well. So stuff that's happened in the past may not be the same this year, because we've saw them do it a little differently this year than they have in the past. Because in the past, it seemed like they were more about that strength of schedule. This year, they don't seem like they're as concentrated on that. And they keep saying the SEC is getting a bias. To me, it looks like the Big Ten's getting more of a bias. All these games, the SEC here, at the end of the day, the SEC would be on the road, going up north, where they've been dying to get us in late November or early December or whenever. They might get their wish. We might go up there and have to play a game in the snow or in weather that we're not really accustomed to playing in most of the time. But I just don't think that's going to factor in as much as they think it is. But what I'm trying to say here is there's not really a bias towards the SEC. We just have better teams. And if the Big 12 and the ACC don't like it, well, then be more consistent and play better is all I can tell you.
Well, and we could talk all night about what the best conference is and all that. But when it comes down to it, I think that if you're going to have these metrics that we're talking about, you got to be a little more consistent how you use them. Because you look at a team like, how much difference is it between 1 and 2 losses? Especially if there's a great gap in the strength of schedule. You look at Penn State. Their strength of schedule isn't great. They've
right outside the top 12, what you're saying there, right outside the top 12, to make your point, you got SMU ahead of BYU.
Yeah.
And BYU beat SMU. There's no round robin there to sort of deflect that like it is in the SEC, where you got Alabama beats Georgia, Tennessee beats Alabama, and Georgia beats Tennessee. These 2 played each other, and they really have no other common opponent. So, I mean, They're just one spot. So why don't you just take BYU and put them at 13 and SMU at 14? It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, it's not so much that you have a committee. I think there could be a better way, but what we need from this committee is more transparency in how they select these teams, and just some kind of formula for them to start with. I don't think there is one. How much are we going to and keep it consistent from committee to committee? Each committee come in with these rules, kind of the guidelines, a formula to start with, and say, okay, this is how we're going to look at the win-loss record. This is how much weight we're going to put in strength of schedule. You say you have these 4 big segments, 1 or 5 or however you want to do. What percentage of each factor is going to be the weight in how you determine this field? One-loss record maybe 25%, or strength of schedule 15%. I'm just throwing numbers out, but you just have some kind of guideline set when you're going in and say, okay, this is how we're going to do it. This is the weight that each factor is going to play into it, and then go from there. I think they're just kind of looking at these teams and say, okay, I think this one's better than this one. This one has this one-loss record. They would, do maybe this over here, and they just kind of jumble it all together and see what comes out. There's got to be more consistency in this.
I Am Sooner says, Boomer Outlaw, Bama coming to Norman, love it. Win or lose, it's Bama versus Oklahoma, good as it gets. Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about bringing these two in, get more blue blood, more iconic matchups now. But like I've told people in the past, man, if you keep adding blue blood, somebody's going to lose. And somebody's going to start losing that swagger and losing that aura about themselves. And it might be Alabama in the future. I don't know. Right now, Oklahoma's catching the losses. That's why I say if the SEC expands again, we need to maybe go out and get some basketball programs or something.
Yeah.
Instead of all these football teams.
Yeah, I don't know where this conference expansion is going to end, but I just personally, I hope there's a little bit of a cap on it for a while, because the Big Ten now has 18 teams. The SEC has 16. It's really going to be hard to be able to have consistent scheduling, and just to be able to just be able to have enough great matchups. Alabama didn't play Texas this year. They didn't play Ole Miss. They didn't play Mississippi State. Some really games we've gotten used to. There are we're going to lose those, but they're going to make up for it some with some of the ones that we're adding, like the Alabama-Oklahoma game. But there's going to be a lot of give and take in this for a number of years, and it's going to take a while to figure it out. I saw a graphic today where you have this conference expansion, and they said it will make for more big games, but you're seeing a lot of these conference leaders not play each other. Now, there's exceptions to that, of course, like Georgia, that had to play Alabama, Texas, Ole Miss, and Tennessee, which is just insane that you look at it. But then you have teams like Texas that are, again.
How does that happen? How does the new boy on the block get a huge solid over Georgia, who's won two national championships here recently? Meanwhile, Oklahoma's a new guy, and it's like they're getting hazed. They bring in Oklahoma and just hazing the hell out of Oklahoma. I think Texas might have slipped Sankey a few dollars or something. I don't know, man, because them Texas people got money. Thunder OU Sooner says he wanted to give you a fist bump for making Texas fans mad. So,
well, it wasn't intentional. I mean, I was just giving facts, but every fan base has them. There's a lot of fans, and this goes for Alabama, Auburn, Texas, Tennessee, Oklahoma, whatever. There's a certain contingent of the fan base that doesn't like facts. And if you say anything that is remotely negative against their team, you make them mad. I mean, I've ticked off Alabama fans before. Yeah, I know you have too, Outlaw. I mean, you and I have gone back and forth before about Alabama, about Nick Saban. But so there's just some fans that just don't want to hear anything remotely negative about their team, and that's kind of what I run into there. It wasn't all of them, but there was a good number where it was just like they were very mad that I pointed out the fact that Texas had a weak SEC schedule compared to other teams.
Now, 1989 M is a Michigan fan, so he's coming from an unbiased perspective here when he says this. Everybody knows that Texas ain't winning no SEC, and it's not going to the playoffs. They're fixing to get bounced.
That's an interesting scenario there, because Texas they're in a good spot right now, but it's kind of a precarious spot because if they lose to Texas A&M and find themselves out of the SEC championship game, I don't know if their schedule is strong enough to keep them in. Now, if that brand bias really does happen that they talk about, I think that you will be able to, maybe still see them get in. They may find a way to keep them in the top 12, but it's going to be kind of precarious if they are not able to beat Texas A&M in a couple of weeks. I think they should take care of Kentucky. I don't want to dismiss the Wildcats, but Texas should be able to win that one.
Kentucky did go on the road and beat Ole Miss.
Yeah, I mean they've hardly done anything since. I think they've maybe won 1-2 games since that one. I don't have one of them was Murray State last week. Right. They've really fallen on hard times, and I'm not sure that Mark Stoops is going to be able to survive much longer if he keeps doing that way, because there are a lot of people that are calling for Tulane's head coach to come to Lexington, John Summerall, with the games he's won down there in New Orleans with Tulane. But that coaching carousel is going to get really interesting in the next few weeks. But we talked about this playoff, and there's still a couple of weeks left. So what we see in this field now, it's not going to be the same.
Oh no, it's not. I hope Alabama gets a home game here in Tuscaloosa, because that would really help the economy around here.
That would be great. But that with the 2 losses, that and the games left being Oklahoma and Auburn. I'm not sure how much there's going to be some teams I think ahead of them they're going to have to lose for that to happen, but we'll see. Right now it looks like they're on that kind of right now. The playoff has them, the projections has them going to Notre Dame. So
right. We're a 9 seed.
Yeah, they're a 9 seed. So just reverse that to an 8 that they would get a home game. So it's a little bit better possibility than I think maybe.
That's right, and that's why I said in a way I don't want to go to the SEC title game, because then it'll make us, even if we make the playoffs, we'll have to go on the road somewhere like, I don't know, Indiana, maybe even Ohio State, because Ohio State and Oregon's probably going to have a rematch, and the loser of that's probably going to get the 5 seed or either the 6 seed, either the 5 or 6 seed, I would guess. So there's a possibility Alabama could end up going to Autzen Stadium or to Columbus a year or 2 early, because we got a series scheduled with Ohio State in a few years, home and home. But out of this college football bracket, I don't know if you can really see it or not, but out of this college football bracket for this week, what is it that you have the most problem with? What really in this bracket really you think is wrong?
I mean, I look at this and there's some things that you can look at and you say, yeah, maybe, but I think the biggest thing is Brigham Young there, BYU. They lost, and having I'm looking at the bracket here, and the bracket and the rankings are 2 different things. That always is confusing. But I'm just
sort of confusing.
Yeah, there's some teams there that I just don't know, how good they are. And even though Brigham Young is 12th in that spot, they're like 14th, and SMU is ranked ahead of them. I mean, that's the biggest problem I have. Well, why do we have to have a top 25? That's my biggest thing. Is just look at this bracket, seed it how you're going to seed it, and don't worry about doing a full top 25. There's really no need for it. All it does is you look at it like, okay, well, they're 13th here, but they're 12th in the bracket, and they're okay in the bracket. They're 5th, but they're 4th or 3rd in the rankings. I mean, you can have Ohio State ranked 2nd, but you see them there at number 5. That makes no sense. Just do away with the ranking and just give us the bracket. That's all that we need.
What people don't realize in this whole thing is that just because Brigham Young or Colorado, whoever wins the Big 12 wins it, doesn't necessarily mean you get a spot just because you won your conference, because It's the top 4 conference champions. And right now, Boise State's ranked ahead of BYU in the poll, so Boise State gets that automatic, whereas they would have been the number 12 automatically because they're G5. BYU's no longer G5, so they wouldn't get the automatic G5. At that point, they would have to give it to Tulane or somebody like that. But just because BYU or Miami wins the ACC or the Big 12 doesn't necessarily mean that's an automatic for them. if there's another conference champion that gets ranked higher, even if it was like the Sun Belt, if they were ranked higher, they would get a top 4 seed by the contract.
Yeah. I think there's some things in this that I really like. I like that we have more teams. I didn't at first, but I think it's made for an even more exciting regular season than I thought it was going to. But the full top 25 and the way that they've done this is a lot of it is just unnecessary noise. Sometimes it's okay to simplify things. And I think that you have this bracket here. You say, okay, here are our top 4 projected conference champions right now. Put them in the 4 spot, and then here's the rest. That's all you got to do. I mean, it's really all you got to do. It's not necessary to have the rest of this noise of who is ranked second but might be 5th and who's 25th. I mean, it's completely unnecessary.
NIL Commish says in this bracket, he'd rather be the 5 seed. BYU and then Boise State, that's the easiest path to the Final Four. So, yeah, if Ohio State beats BYU in this game, yeah, and they probably would because it's in Columbus, then they would go up against Boise State on a neutral field. And ironically, that being the Fiesta Bowl. And, that's where Boise State had their claim to glory against Oklahoma. So, yeah, that 5 seed is probably pretty much a hidden gem for a lot of people.
Outlaw, I want to shift focus for a minute and talk about some of these other games real quick before we have to go. There's some really good ones this week that I'm really interested in, and one of these really ties into the playoff and what might happen, and that's Indiana and Ohio State. That game is at Columbus. That's not good for the Hoosiers, and we saw them last week play a team that could kind of match up physically with them a bit in Michigan. Yeah, they won the game, but it was 20-15. Before that, Indiana was killing people. I think the average margin of victory was something like 44-13 or something like that. And they were playing a lot of bad teams. Their only team on their schedule right now that is bowl eligible is Washington, and that's why they have a 100-strength schedule. So it's going to be interesting to see if what we've seen from Indiana and how highly they are ranked in stuff like sacks and tackles for a loss and third in total defense, and that's going to be able to hold up against a team with a firepower that Ohio State has. And if their offense can move the ball against a really good Ohio State defense. Now, Ohio State has its own issues. Former Alabama transfer, Seth McLaughlin, their starting center, he got hurt in practice, Achilles injury. And so that's another cog on that offensive line that they're going to be missing. So I think that game might be a little bit closer than some think because Indiana is so well coached. They're so disciplined. Kirk Cignetti has done a really good job there.
The thing that stands out about Indiana to me is the 3 non-conference games they played were against very, very lower tier teams, man, like Western Illinois and teams like that. And they get on to Alabama and the SEC for playing 1 Mercer. Meanwhile, Indiana played 3 Mercer-type games.
Yeah.
Which absolutely helps your team stay a lot more healthy than someone like Ohio State who has to play a harder schedule.
And I think Ohio State has a talent edge. I think they should win. But, if Indiana gets blown out, I don't think they will. But if Indiana gets blown out, then what do you do with them? Because they're one big test. They would have failed miserably. So that's going to be interesting to see. You got Army Notre Dame. That could have playoff implications. We saw what Notre Dame did to Navy, the team that ran the option, but Navy had 6 turnovers in that ballgame. I don't think Army is going to turn the ball over that much. Notre Dame's okay against the run. They're giving about 120 yards per game, 126, something like that. So they're decent against the run. Nothing spectacular. But if Army can take care of the ball and run the ball effectively, and they're also very good against the run. They're third in the nation run defense. But it's kind of like with Indiana, who they play. So we'll see how all that translates, the stats that we look at when they're finally facing a team with some really good talent.
They are some.
Since that Northern Illinois loss, I think Notre Dame has every game except one, the Louisville game, they've beaten teams by double digits. Many of them by 20 or more. So the Irish are kind of on a roll. So that's going to be an interesting game. And then the one that I'm really looking at, the early slate, is Florida and Ole Miss.
Yeah, that's going to be tricky for Ole Miss going down to Florida because Florida's actually playing better now that DJ Lagway is back. So that could be a really tricky game for Ole Miss.
He's back. He's still limited. He still cannot run the ball like they would like for him to. You saw him against LSU last week. They kept him in the pocket as much as possible. They didn't ask him to do too much. He's going to have to do more against Ole Miss. So his health, how durable he is, how much he can move the ball and possibly run, that's going to be something to watch. Ole Miss, it's just insane how many sacks they get and how many tackles for a loss. They lead the nation with 103 tackles for a loss. I think the next team has like 84. So they are leading by a large margin. But Florida is best in the SEC at protecting the quarterback. So that line of scrimmage when Florida has the ball that's going to be the key to the ball game. Because Lagway, he's still a young QB. He's been making some good plays. He's been making some good decisions. But he is yet to face just a team that can swarm the quarterback like the Rebels can. I look at that Rebels defense. The first thing I look at, I say, Pete Golding, why couldn't you do this at Alabama? Secondly, it's just how impressive they have been just creating these havoc plays. And it's only going to take if they can only get to Lagway a few times, I don't think it's going to take much to rattle him. So they've got to protect him, and they've got to make sure that he's making smart decisions with the football, some quick passes, and they've got to do something that they're not really been designed to do, and that's play keep away. Even with Florida playing better, it's still, and the game in the swamp is going to be tricky with what Florida wants to do on offense. It doesn't match up that great against what Ole Miss can do on defense.
Well, Pete Golding, like I said, here at Alabama, he took a lot of heat. But it might have just been that, Nick Saban's in his twilight years, and maybe he wasn't really letting Pete Golding have full reign of the defense. And I know that's going to piss a lot of Alabama people off, but I just think that, Nick Saban was not blameless in all that stuff that was going on towards the end, where we were a very undisciplined team, to be quite honest with you. And now
most definitely
a little undisciplined, and people's like, this wouldn't happen under Saban. Yes, we already discussed this last time he was here. Yes, it would, because it did.
Yep.
Another tricky game for somebody, and that's Colorado. They're playing Kansas. I think it's at Kansas, and Kansas was supposed to be good this year, and now they're starting to come around. They done won like 3 games in a row against ranked teams, and they're basically spoiling everybody's party. And I would love it if they would spoil Con Time Deion Sanders' party this week.
That's another one that's really interesting because Colorado, both teams are playing some really good football right now. And but as you mentioned, Kansas is finally becoming the team. And it's too late for them to really do anything playoff wise or conference championship wise, but there's still some bowl eligibility possibilities there. And they're finally playing the type of ball that we expected them to see them play. The game is at Lawrence, but Colorado has won like 4 games in a row, all of them by double digits. They're on a roll. So somebody's streak is going to come to an end, obviously. And but that's going to be a tough game. And last week when Kansas beat BYU, it was at Provo, and the Cougars were only like a 2-point favorite. This game, even though it's at Kansas, it's still a tight spread with Colorado, I think, like a field goal favorite. So this is not a game that Colorado can afford to lose. And because they've got 2 losses, only 1 conference loss, but they've got 2 losses. So they lose this one, they have no hope of getting into the playoff. So this is a very big game for them, both in the Big 12 is an interesting race. You got a couple of teams that kind of control their own destiny, which is Brigham Young. If they beat who they escapes me off. They play Arizona State this week.
Yeah, Arizona State's coming on too. They're 8-2.
Arizona State's coming on too. But if they beat Arizona State and then they win against Houston the following week, they're in. They control their own destiny.
That's right.
Colorado, if they win out, they're in. So it'll be set. And then you got Iowa State that's in the mix too. But if Arizona State beats Brigham Young and then Iowa State loses their game to Utah this week, Arizona State is in if they win out. So the Big 12 is a very interesting race because you've got still a lot of teams that are mathematically still in the equation to go to the conference championship game. But a couple of them, Brigham Young, BYU, and then Colorado, both, if they win out, those will be your participants in the Big 12 championship game. But Buffaloes cannot overlook Lance Leipold's team because they are playing some really good football right now. They've got, as you mentioned, like 2 or 3 games in a row where they've beaten ranked teams. And they're playing some good football. And, again, it's at Lawrence.
Texas A&M and Auburn is another game that the ESPN talking heads just keep talking about Texas A&M better be on alert. Texas A&M could be primed for an upset. And I'm just like, Are they watching the same Auburn team I've been watching this year?
Well,
I mean, the Auburn mystique works only when it's Alabama or Georgia. Now, you can go in there and beat New Mexico State and win by 21. So,
yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, do you see Texas A&M maybe being in a little bit of trouble going to Auburn?
I mean, I think it's a possibility, but not a strong one. Again, I'm not in. I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. I'm not in love with A&M's QB situation, and Auburn has been playing some good defense here and there all year long. They've been able to be very. They're pretty high on the defensive efficiency scale. The game is at Jordan-Hare. It is a night game, I believe, if I look at the schedule correctly. So it could be a tricky one. But if both teams play to their level of capability, I think that A&M does win that one. I think it's going to be a little close. I think it's going to be within a touchdown. But I think A&M still should win it. But don't underestimate Auburn in this game, especially if they can take care of the ball, because that's the main thing that's been their problem all year long. But we overreact so much to these games sometimes against the lesser competition because Auburn looked really good last week. They did, but we have to remember who they were playing. They're playing Louisiana Monroe. And it's a lot different looking good against teams like Louisiana Monroe and Alabama A&M as they did earlier this season compared to playing teams like Texas A&M, which has which can play some good defense. I know South Carolina kind of ran over them, but Auburn does not have that running quarterback that South Carolina did. So I think A&M should win, but I don't think it's as much of a slam dunk as some A&M fans or some other fans might think. I think the talking heads, as you put it, could be a little more right than wrong on this one, as far as especially if A&M, if Marcel Reed does not play well to start off. He's still an inexperienced quarterback. He's not a great passer. But he can run the ball. But if they can keep him contained, it is a game that they could even possibly win. But it's not something that I'm expecting.
Yeah, and Reese Davis said something that I found pretty interesting and that I think is true with the committee, in that they need to quit trying to compare SEC teams to each other and compare SEC teams to everybody else. Like if it comes down to a playoff spot between Tennessee and Notre Dame or Tennessee and Indiana, compare them to. Don't compare Tennessee to Alabama or Georgia or Ole Miss. You should be comparing against everybody, because this is a tournament for everybody, not just the SEC, right? So I think the committee might get caught up in that a little bit sometimes. But I can tell you this, Tennessee is definitely going to be rooting against Notre Dame the next few weeks, because I think Notre Dame losing might be the only avenue Tennessee has to get in.
And that's tough because Tennessee's had a good year. They've only got 2 losses. They beat Alabama, but they're like 4 spots behind Alabama. And it's tricky because you have this log jam where Tennessee beat Alabama, Alabama beat Georgia, Georgia beat Tennessee, and that's when we get into these weird tiebreakers. And I think, and that's where you have this human element where they're looking at all these games. They're like, we really don't know who is better, but we're more familiar with Alabama being good than we are Tennessee being good. And I think that it may not even be intentional, but I think there's an inherent bias in that, where again that legacy bias, that brand name bias. And Tennessee's a good program. They're one of the right on the, if they're not a blue blood, they're around the edge there, depending on who you ask. But still, in recent years, even though Nick Saban's gone, it's still that Alabama brand. Even as an Alabama fan, I can say this because that's maybe the only explanation why they are ranked so much higher than Tennessee. That and the fact the past couple of games, we've seen Alabama be very impressive. And the last time we saw Tennessee, they lost by 2 touchdowns.
Well, they dropped Alabama down too far, Georgia would be ahead of Alabama. So they couldn't do that, or they didn't do that. So they had to pick their poison, basically, with this whole round robin of everybody beats everybody. I wouldn't want their job right now. So who would be a sneaky good upset this week for you?
Well, I think you cannot discount Florida, even though it's going to be tough for them. But they're just playing some really good football right now. And what kind of story would it be for Billy Napier to beat the guy that supposedly was going to replace him a few weeks ago? I mean,
That's right.
because everybody and their brother were looking and they're like, oh, Napier's gone, and they're going to go hard after Lane Kiffin, and Lane Kiffin's going to take the Florida job, and he's going to wake the sleeping giant, and we're going to see the glory return to Gainesville. We heard all that. A few weeks later, it looks like that Napier could get this team bowl eligible with a brutal schedule and the injuries that they've had, and have a really not a good year, but have a better than expected year. And their remaining games, they could possibly win out. And if they do, even if they lose to Ole Miss, they're going to be bowl eligible. They had some games like the LSU win. They took Tennessee to overtime in Knoxville. So, there's some bright spots there. There's some stuff to build on. And I think Napier's probably saved his job.
Yeah.
Now, if he loses to Florida State, then all bets are off.
They definitely. But LSU might have saved his job for him. And might have inadvertently down the road, maybe not this year, but it may be in the beginning of the end for Brian Kelly at LSU.
That's going to be a real interesting thing to watch over the next couple of weeks because LSU this week, they play Vanderbilt. That's not a gimme. And then they end the season against Oklahoma, which with the defense that Oklahoma plays and how the how LSU has struggled lately and been committing so many turnovers and just playing so sloppy, that's not a gimme either. And then a lot of people said there were two things right now that were saving Brian Kelly's job. One, that huge buyout, and that still may save his job because it goes down from like 66 million or whatever it is to I think 51 million next year.
Yeah.
And so he may have another year to straighten things out just because of the sheer amount of that buyout. But the other thing was the recruiting class and the commitment of Bryce Underwood. Well, what happened today, Outlaw?
That's right. Michigan took their shit.
Exactly. Underwood is going to Ann Arbor now, and there's rumors that he may be taking one of their 4-star wide receiver commits with him because I think they were teammates in high school. So there's a lot of rumors about that. So this great recruiting class that Kelly has put together, we're starting to see some cracks in that.
Well, I just don't like Brian Kelly to me, man, because he just comes across as a very shady individual. Even when he wins at Notre Dame, he won games, but he never could win the big games, right? Never could win championships.
I mean, Kelly did very well at the lower levels. He, in Division II, he won some national championships. He did well at Cincinnati. And overall, he did well at Notre Dame. But, when you get into this realm of like Notre Dame and LSU, what they expect at some point is championships.
That's right.
And he has not been able to deliver. He's gotten to that level at Notre Dame. He had the butt kicking he got by Alabama in 2012 season, and then he made the playoff and got another butt kicking from Alabama.
Well, I'll tell you what really done it for me with Brian Kelly was when he come down to LSU and done that fake accent. Now, it'd been different. It would have been different, man. I would have been okay with it, and it sounds trivial, but it would have been different if he was doing it as a joke. But he wasn't. Yeah. He literally wanted people to believe that he had an accent. And to me, it's a big old red flag that this dude, something ain't quite right about him, man. He's a little shady. He might win games, but there's some moral compass issues with this guy, just like Urban Meyer. That's why I don't like Urban Meyer, because there's just some shadiness about Urban. And yeah, he'll win you some games short term, but long term, when he starts getting the great grand trash that he gets in there, it just starts going downhill.
Well, I've always said that there's this thing with coaches, and coaches, a lot of them have very abrasive personalities. We saw Nick Saban and just how he would get after players and get after the media, and let's just call it what it is. He was a jerk at times.
That's
but
right.
He won, so people put up with it.
That's right.
Brian Kelly can be a bit of a jerk at times. He can be very abrasive. He has these antics where he pounds the table, and he's been accused of throwing his players under the bus. We saw him screaming at a wide receiver on the sidelines and calling him effing uncoachable. And then we saw one of his own players, Kyron Lacey, yell at him coming off the sidelines. And if you're not winning, people aren't going to put up with that.
Well, some of the stuff he does is abrasive, just like Saban, but the difference to me is Saban's abrasiveness doesn't come across as disingenuous or shady. and half-ass. Like that pounding of the table, man, he barely hit that table, man. I'm like, man, you can't hit that table harder than that. No wonder your players aren't tackling well, man. You can't even hit a table hard.
Well, the word we use a lot in a team and whether they're winning or losing is have they found their identity? And I don't think LSU has much of an identity right now because I don't think Brian Kelly has much of an identity. He's not a very genuine guy. Again, like you said, he comes off very disingenuous. He performs these acts with a fake accent and that cringe dancing he had with recruits, where he was like, I'm not even going to go into details on that because it's just creepy. But when you do stuff like that and you kind of put on an act, it's only going to last for so long.
Yeah, man.
And I think you're starting to see with some of his players and some of the fans and maybe even some of the administration, they look at this guy and they're thinking, he's not what we thought he was.
Yeah, when I first see Brian Kelly, if I don't know he's a head coach, I think he's a politician. He looks like a sleazy politician car salesman.
But let's face it, a lot of head coaches come off that way because what's the main thing that politicians do? They lie.
That's right.
What head coaches do, especially when they're asked about other jobs, They lie.
Now, a sneaky good possible upset just because I've seen teams go there and they're like a different team when they play at this place, like USC earlier this year, is a game that people might want to watch that nobody's really paying attention to me is Penn State at Minnesota. So just keep your eye on that game. I mean, I might be totally and completely wrong, but it seems like when people go to Minnesota to play a game, there's sometimes a little boogaboo there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to find that one on my screen here. It's an afternoon game. It's the afternoon CBS game. Penn State's like an 11.5-point favorite, but it's at Minnesota. I mean, Minnesota, they're average. They're 6-4 football team. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, these are the games that we see sometimes where the upsets happen, where the Golden Gophers step up and they can ruin a season. And with the schedule that Penn State has and just no really premier wins on there, they're ranked as high as they are because they played Ohio State tough. I mean, let's just be honest about that. It was like a touchdown ball game.
Exactly.
And if they lose to Minnesota, I think you see them fall out of the top 20.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That's another game that, Tennessee or someone that's on the bubble. It's funny how we're talking about teams on the bubble now. I feel like we're talking about NCAA March Madness now.
Right.
But that could definitely help Tennessee out. And I'm not the biggest Tennessee fan in the world, but I'll be honest with you. Tennessee deserves to be in the playoffs.
I think so too. I mean, if the goal is, in which there's a little bit of a change there in the goal of the best teams because you have those conference auto bids, and I realize why they had to do that with the field, but but if the goal is to have the top conference champions and then fill the at-large spots with truly the best teams available, I don't see how you keep out Tennessee.
I don't either. I mean, I think Tennessee, even with 2 losses, I think Tennessee's a better team than Notre Dame with 1 loss.
Agreed.
All right, brother. I appreciate you coming on here with me tonight. I guess I'm going to call it tonight. Anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
I think we pretty much covered it all. I think I've bored your people enough, but I see Sigma's comment there. This is this amazing show he posted a while back. Sigma, I appreciate it, and hopefully we'll be able to do this. I know the season is ending soon. Sadly, but hopefully we'll have at least a couple more chances to chat before it's over.
We talk about all off season about we can't wait till it gets here, and then when it gets here, we're wishing it away. I'm like, man, let's just enjoy it while it's here, man, because it goes by like a blink of an eye, man. Sigma, we'll close on this, says that Kelly has mastered bullshitto.
Black belt.
Oh, you got that Karate Kid shit, the crane going on.
Oh.
By the way, Cobra Kai is a great series.
Oh, gosh. Is it not? It is
except
incredible.
For this last season, man, I'm not really digging some of the stuff that they wrote this last season. I mean, don't give it away if you've seen all of them. But I've only watched the first 2 or 3 of this last season. So
I'll just say I watched the most recent one recently. It picks up. It picks up.
All right, brother. All right, brother. It was good seeing you again.
You too, Outlaw. Y'all have a great night, and thanks for putting up with me yakking for almost an hour and a half about college football.
Oh no, brother, you raised our IQ points tonight.
Thank you, Outlaw.
All right, later. And that was Jeremy Smith from College Football Universe. Y'all check his group out. I think he's got another group as well. I'll have to ask him about that and post that next time around. If y'all got any more questions for me before I get out here, is any topics y'all want to talk about, I'll stay on here for another 30 minutes or so if y'all have anything else that y'all want to touch upon. But bring back up these college football games real quick. Just let y'all know who's playing. UMass is at Georgia. Who cares? UNLV is ranked 23rd. They're at San Jose State. SMU is at Virginia. That could be a real tricky game for SMU if they're trying to get if they're trying to get into the playoffs. If SMU wins out, they could play Miami for the ACC title. And if SMU wins, it'd be a great story for SMU. We all know they got the death penalty, and it basically destroyed their program for about 20 or 25 years. So it'd be a great story if we could get SMU into the playoffs over Miami, in my opinion. Illinois is at Rutgers. That's a game that's probably going to decide some bowl eligibility type stuff. We already talked about Colorado at Kansas. Let's hope that Con Time and his son Saka Zulu Sanders shit the bed. BYU at Arizona State, another big game that's going to decide have a lot of implications. Would not surprise me if Arizona State beat BYU and Arizona State got moved into the playoffs. That'd be another good story. Kentucky's at Texas. Everybody's overlooking that game. Now, Kentucky did go to Ole Miss and win. So, it'd be pretty funny if Kentucky went down there and beat them, right? Army at Notre Dame. Is that at Notre Dame? I thought that was at Army. But anyway, and that's about it. Iowa State at Utah. Outlaw, y'all got big plans for Thanksgiving yet? We got to do a Turkey Day stream. Yeah, might have to do that, man. I'm actually going to do my Thanksgiving late with my daughter and my grandson and my son-in-law up in McCalla, Alabama. We're going to go up there and do Thanksgiving on Saturday and watch the football game. I've never done that before, although you see a lot of families do that. They'll watch football on Saturday and have Thanksgiving on Saturday, and that's what we're going to do this weekend. What about y'all? What are y'all going to do? I also like ham, man. I love some ham, man. Some baked ham with some pineapples on it. That's some good stuff, brother. Some good stuff. Also, there's a little money dollar sign at the bottom of this. You want to get your comment read out real quick before I get off here, and you want me to address you directly above everybody else, just click on that little money dollar sign with the circle or the square around it. Write your comment out first, then hit send, and I will address your comment first, and it makes a small donation to the program and helps keep the lights on. You can also get your badge and get deputized and get a random Four Horsemen shout-out on the actual podcast, as well as possibly be the comment of the day for only $2.99 a month, 75 cents a week. It's just a half a bottle of water for the Outlaws, a little join button next to the subscribe button. And, of course, there's the big four: like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and they're all absolutely free. You can see right here, Sigma's got his badge. Bagman's in the house. Outlaw Sooner Nation is relying on y'all this Saturday. Bama looking to fire BV early. I don't think they're going to fire BV regardless of what happens this season, unless, of course, they lose by 60 or 70 points to Alabama and LSU. I think Oklahoma could actually beat LSU. LSU's in disarray. There's a lot of stuff behind the scenes going on with Brian Kelly. They just lost a big prize recruit to Michigan, and there's some rumors going on around about Brian Kelly and some female staffer as well. So don't be surprised if Oklahoma doesn't get the win over Alabama, if they don't beat LSU and get bowl eligible. Any more questions before I go? Well, guess I might do a live stream again tomorrow night as well. I might bring some Oklahoma people up here and get their take on the game as well. And if not, I guess I'll see y'all this weekend. If y'all got any ideas for comments or ideas for live streams, or if you want to be on the live stream, hit me up on X, a.k.a. Twitter, at OCF Productions, and hit me up in DMs, and we'll talk and get you on the show, or either y'all can give me some ideas for a show, and I'll take those into consideration. As Sigma says, take care, everyone. With that, I'm out of here. KMCA to all the other teams. Class is now officially dismissed.